Christy?
Hey, Christy.
I agree. Those salt scrubs are amazing, and all my friends are loving them too. So I need to order some more. But I do have a question about a new client, and her condition is called idiopathic intracranial hypertension. She has a cyst on her pineal gland at 4 millimeters, and she added that she has antibodies for lupus, but no active disease. They suspect Lyme, but no test done. So my question is primarily with the hypertension and the pineal cyst, are there oils that you would avoid? And then also, what would you recommend oils and chronic healing?
I mean, I'd avoid things that are hot, like I'd avoid like cinnamon, cassia. Thyme would probably be okay. But if you're going to use thyme just because of the issues with the potentials for autoimmune, I'd probably stick with Moroccan thyme. The other thing to use with autoimmune issues, and this might even be a good thing to use here, I mean, it's not going to necessarily treat the condition, but it could be something that's very helpful, is vetiver, and like make it into like an ointment or lotion or even a liniment so that you can apply it all over the body. You know, we're going to be doing the regenerating the immune system in like about 3 weeks or so. And so we're going to go systematically, and it's going to be a lot of applying topical things combined with inhalations and everything. And one of it is the use of vetiver to stimulate the immune system, but also to regulate like hypervigilant immune responses, you know, combined with like Moroccan thyme and things like that. And so whenever in doubt with anything that's autoimmune, or that there's the potential for autoimmune, I should say. You know, she has some indicators, but she's not fully testing positive, it sounds like. The Moroccan thyme is anti-inflammatory. It's good, and it's not very hot. You know, where like red thyme, white thyme, or have a little bit more heat to it. But definitely stay away from the cinnamon and things like that. Idiopathic. I mean, I'm just thinking this out for a second.
Yeah, like part of what I'm wondering, because she has a high stress industry, if I just start working on like calming the body down, calming down the stress.
Yes, stress is a big indicator, like I would think, or a lot of low emotions. Here, I would say it's probably stress. The other issue. Yeah, blood's just not draining out of the head. So, like a couple issues, like a lot of times with migraine symptoms, and we know that she gets migraines. Are they just bad headaches, or are they migraines?
She did not list them as migraines, but she listed that she gets headaches and she's regularly takes, you know, over-the-counter painkillers.
Okay. And she didn't say what part of her head she's getting them.
No, I've only done like a pre-consult. The session's actually coming up, so I just had like a brief conversation with her.
I'd be curious to see where the headaches are at, but let's just move forward no matter what. And so, based on what you're saying, hyper reactive sensory nerves, tension in the head. I would guess that there's probably a lot of tension in the jaw as well with that kind of condition, like a lot of tension in the jaw. So a couple of things that I would look at. So for one, reduction of stress, but also reduction of adrenal function. And so that can look a couple of different ways. You know, we always talk about marjoram being something that pulls you out of fight, flight, and tones the vagus nerve. That could possibly be helpful. But here, because of stress loads and uh, what does she do for a living? I'm just curious. Like I think there's something about like her environment. Like, so what does she do for a living?
She's a political journalist, so she's in all that crazy
Okay,
stuff all
that's
the time.
yeah. Okay, now I remember. Okay,
So I'm trying to just teach her and give her tools to help her manage.
right. So this is what I would say. So with that piece of information, like so here's a little bit of the issue is, okay, so we have the body reaction, we have the head reaction. We also have, she's in a situation, like you said, she's a political, what is it, a political journalist?
Journalist, yeah.
Yeah. And so a bit of a public figure, even if it's not always like her name, which I mean, she's out there. And she's in an arena where, you know, people are going to get upset at her regardless of what she says. You know, everybody's just all over the place in this arena. So she's going to have hostilities being directed at her. And so whenever we see somebody who's in a position where, you know, maybe they're in charge of several thousand people or, you know, something like that, there are certain parameters that might be a little bit different than the average person. And some of it can be stress levels, but there's also like levels of aggression and hostility that are directed at you, but it might not be by people having conversations with you, but people are sitting and grinding on you no matter what. And so what happens is, you know, like I always kind of hate using the term psychic attack, but it's the thing that kind of best describes it. But it's just like people thinking super negative or hostile thoughts and directing them towards a person. And even though you might not be aware of it, your body still has a reaction. You know, just like you can do healing on a person at a distance, you can grind on a person and make them feel bad at a distance in this very same way. Same way you could just pray for a person. Like all of it is the same mechanics. And so a lot of times guys that or people, I should say, in the corporate setting, when they would have several, you know, a few thousand employees or something, when they would make decisions, their blood pressure would go up, for example, quite substantially. And it was usually tied to a bunch of hostility coming from employees, not that they were stressed out about it. And so here I would say that kind of falls into the same line. And so I like the idea of calming down the adrenals, but a little bit more specific towards people being aggressive or hostile towards her. And I think this actually even would start to resolve some of the health issues. For one, it will make her feel better. Like it won't make her body less reactive. But I think it will also actually help reduce some of the symptoms. In any time that the lymphatic system is stagnant, it makes the sensory nerves much more activated. And when the sensory nerves are much more activated, the tendency is for the adrenals to get more activated. So I still stick with the thing that I say about the vetiver. Calming to the sensory nerves, relaxing to the body, still can help stimulate and regulate the immune system. But I would actually use, you could use spikenard. I would actually probably use jasmine. I like jasmine for certain kinds of psychic attack. And the reason being is it still has some antispasmodic properties, which means it's calming and relaxing to the body, but it's very good for calming and soothing lower emotional responses. And it helps to diminish the tendency for the body to push back, like when somebody's being aggressive towards you. You know, it almost softens those responses and almost makes it a little bit more like kind of playful, which takes off the intensity a little bit. And so I would actually use jasmine, probably applied to the feet or to the wrist. She could also take long, slow, deep breaths at night when she's getting ready to go to bed. It would probably help her sleep better. It would definitely relax her body, relax her emotional body. And stimulate the more intuitive part of our brain, which means that the sensory nerve part is calming down. Vetiver will do that as well, but sometimes I use a combination of for that vetiver, spikenard, and jasmine, either mixed together or like applied to different parts of the body, separately. I tend to put the jasmine on the feet, on the wrists, on the temples, or just a lot of inhalation. You could also do the chest. The vetiver, I kind of cover the whole body. The spikenard, I tend to put on the feet, like just cover the feet. I would do that. You could have her spend some time doing something that's like kind of cleansing to the kidneys and the Mingmen. You could use some Palo Santo, you could use some hyssop, you could use some even eucalyptus, something like that. Chocolate root cleanser actually would be great, actually, now that I think that out. With her focus just on her Mingmen and kidneys. I think that's probably going to be the thing that helps to regulate all that. But part of the issue with something like this is the brain is real congested. The blood vessels in the head are a little bit dilated, and there is like a lot of accumulated energy in the head. And so her like she looks like kind of a little bit like this, like her lower body and everything, and it kind of gets a little bit bigger up here, but it's more because of congestion. And so you could have her inhale oils that are like dark blue, like dark blue tansy or yarrow, German chamomile, something like that, even that blue cypress, with her awareness on the jaws. Her jaws are very overactivated. That is causing part of the headaches and the head issue. My guess is she's probably also got a lot of tension in her jaws. She might not, sometimes they have it and they're not aware of it because it's been there so long, but there's probably a bunch of tension in her jaws. Some kava taken internally could be helpful if she's willing to take something internal. If that doesn't respond, I would actually probably shift over to maybe like anise or anise. And just because it has a balancing effect on the autonomic nervous system, which is your involuntary nervous system. And just like when you're treating them, this is a thing, an indicator to look at, which is tied to like anxiety, and it can be tied to like imbalance in the autonomic nervous system. Is they'll be talking and then every once in a while they'll just go like they'll just take this weird kind of like big like gulpy breath, like where it just feels like the need to calm them down. It's the diaphragm is tight, they're not getting deep breath, but it's also starting to cause what you would call like gulping of air, which is an imbalance in the autonomic nervous system. Like they're not shifting from like sympathetic to parasympathetic or fight flight to rest and repair. After it starts to calm down, the thing that I would do is, I'm just like laying some things out to swing for the fences. You might have to adjust this, but the thing that I would have her do is work well also with saffron. I probably wouldn't do that right off the bat, but after a couple of treatments, saffron really helps shift you over to the intuitive side of the brain. I would probably give it to her internally, 1 to 2 drops. It will have an effect on the mood, on like how she feels, sense of well-being, but it definitely shifts you out of that sensory part of the mind over to the intuitive side of the mind. And it also helps to regulate the ajna, the center between the eyebrows, that helps to regulate all the centers. And part of it is Yeah, her lower centers look smaller than the bigger ones, but I think it's because they're so congested. And the congestion is probably not hers. It's probably from other people. So pranic healing wise, if you want to go there with that, I would look at cutting cords, cleaning protective webs, and shrinking inhibiting the jaws, the perineum, and the soles of her feet are overactivated as well. Sometimes what happens when somebody's under prolonged periods where somebody's really coming at them, and here it's groups of people, is these centers get overactivated, and it causes almost like a kind of like a Kundalini syndrome of sorts. A lot of times it will manifest as occipital neuralgia, like at the base of their skull. A migraine literally means pain on one side of the head. So it's usually like one side or the other side, it's sharp pain. But when you start dealing with neuralgias, it's the same kind of pain where it's a sharp stabbing pain, or like a toothache, like a real, might be dull, but it's real achy, but it's like a nerve achy. She could be getting it in her face or at the base of her skull. And so that's why I was like curious to see where the headaches are. If it's the top of her head, that is just a traditional high blood pressure headache, which is Ming Men. But she's covered in cords. Her protective webs are super, super congested. Her arms and legs are very congested. Mugwort on the arms and legs, on the joints, can be very, very helpful. I mean, that's a lot to cover in a couple sessions. And so here's the other thing with like really bad headaches and migraines, more migraines and neuralgias than anything, is like sometimes you start shifting them a little bit, and you almost have to do it little bits at a time, because the syndrome, especially if they're in the middle of a headache or a headache cycle or migraine, is sometimes it doesn't change, or it actually even gets a little bit aggravated before it gets better. It's actually better to be able to treat it when they're not in a, I don't want to say crisis, but when they're in the middle of like the headache or the migraine, because there's less potential for there to be some aggravation, of the inflamed nerves. And so sometimes if that's really concerned, I do use some galbanum just to kind of keep the edge down a little bit. At some point, you'll probably need to do some work on the bronchioles to loosen up the diaphragm. But here you're just going to have to start unwinding and see what kind of brings her relief first. I would say cutting cords, and so use of rue for that, or just going through and cutting the cords. I would actually cut cords while she's inhaling the rue, to be honest with you. And then if you have the protective web blend or poplar balsam, have her inhale that as you clean the protective webs. And when you clean the webs, clean them substantially, like way more than you would think, a couple minutes on each one. And that right there will help her to not be so congested and impacted and start to be able to let things off. I would clean the arms and legs and the spine, and then what you think would, be like the migmen or the kidneys, definitely cleaning the lower centers though. Yeah, I mean, there's probably just the little bit that I've said is probably 3 or 4 weeks worth of work. I would say treat her once or twice, and then, get back with me with that, and I can talk you through it. But the thing with a situation like this, there is no template, like this is what you need to do, and there's kind of no right or wrong. It's this just like back and forth where you just start tweaking and treating and unwinding and just starting to address things. And different personalities will handle this kind of intensity that she's in with her job in different ways. And so some people, you can go at them pretty hard and they can handle it. And some people, you really have to do little tiny spoonfuls of therapy at a time and then back off. And so you're not quite sure where she's at yet because you haven't interacted with her. And I would almost say, like she might say go for it, but her body might not be, that's a personality thing, not necessarily the body.
Mm.
And so like, even if she says that, it's great that she's enthusiastic, but I would still monitor how the body's reacting. And I think, within a few sessions, you should probably have your rhythm of what's bringing her relief, but she's going to need a lot of arm and leg work, a lot of